Welcome to Grounded 2, baby. Wow.
Grounded 2 is bigger, buggier, and still full of surprises. Even if some of them aren't finished yet. Let's break down what works, what needs work, and what's still on the way.
Did that just kill me?
Rather than throwing 100 bug facts at you all at once, I'm breaking this down into bite-sized chunks. Environment, gear, mechanics, you name it. I'll go over the pros, the cons, and what's still under construction according to the dev's early access roadmap. So let's jump into Brook Hollow Park. To start off, let's take a look at the first thing that stood out to me, the visuals. Honestly, Grounded 2 looks amazing. The lighting has seen a major upgrade, adding depth and atmosphere that really enhances exploration. Whether you're sneaking through shadows or watching the sun filter through blades of grass, it's genuinely impressive. However, all that visual polish comes at a cost. Performance has taken a noticeable hit, with frame drops and stuttering during intense moments or in graphically demanding areas. On top of that, the lighting can be a bit inconsistent. Look one way, it's bright daylight. Turn around, suddenly it's pitch black. It breaks the immersion, but hopefully it'll be one of the top things on the developer's to-do list.
I don't think that's supposed to happen.
With Grounded 2 being a follow-up to the original, there's obviously some returning lore. But what stood out to me is how the game reflects the 2-year time jump. The HUD and in-game tech really showcase that progression. It genuinely feels like technology has advanced in those 2 years. And you can see that reflected in the overall design and interface. It's a subtle touch, but it goes a long way in making the world feel connected and believable. Next up, let's talk about the stars of the park, the bugs. Grounded 2 brings back plenty of familiar creepy crawlies from the first game, but also introduces some new ones that really shake things up. The variety is better than ever, and each type feels more distinct in both behavior and design. Whether it's a returning spider you thought you could handle, or a brand new threat catching you off guard, the encounters stay tense and exciting. To start off, let's talk a bit about the new designs on returning bugs. There are some subtle yet effective changes here. Orb weavers now have a slightly darker yellow tone, while ants and ladybugs feature more detailed markings that make them feel more alive. But the one that really stood out to me was the new wolf spider design. The hairy legs, the richer color depth, and overall texture work to crank up the fear factor significantly. It looks way more intimidating, and honestly, it perfectly captures the kind of dread a giant spider should bring. This redesign feels spot on. One of the best examples of the new bug mechanics has to be the cockroaches. Just when you think you've taken one down, it pulls a nasty surprise. It loses its head and keeps fighting. It's a small moment, but it adds a lot of personality and chaos to the encounters. Mechanics like this really make the bugs feel more dynamic and unpredictable, which keeps combat feeling fresh. Speaking of combat, Grounded 2 introduces a new system that adds a lot more depth to fights. There's now blocking, dashing, and charged attacks that can break through enemy defenses. At first I found it a bit confusing, but once I got the hang of it, I actually started to enjoy the added layer of strategy. That said, even after putting in over 25 hours, I still couldn't figure out how to properly perform a dash attack to break an enemy shield. And I'm not alone. It seems like players who came from the first game, like myself, tend to fall back into old habits, spamming attacks and relying on perfect blocks. It's a solid system, but I think the game really needs to do a better job of explaining it early on. Right now, it feels like a great mechanic that's too easy to overlook parts of the system. Still, I've got to give credit where it's due. The bug blocking poses are really well done. They add a nice layer of personality to each encounter. My personal favorites are the orb weaver and soldier ants. The way they brace themselves mid-fight is both intimidating and oddly satisfying to watch. And while we're on the topic of bugs, let's discuss what's probably the most talked about feature in Grounded 2. Buggies, the new mountable bugs. In early access, you can unlock 2 buggies, one of them being the red soldier ant, which is mainly focused on construction, and also is one of the fastest ways to get around the map. Honestly, the game instantly feels better the moment you get your first buggy. And thankfully, that happens pretty early on. Later, you can unlock the Orb Weaver buggy, which is much more combat-oriented. It comes with a unique perk, the ability to traverse spider webs scattered throughout the world. These webs often lead to hidden treasures or act as shortcuts, adding a nice layer of exploration. That said, there are a couple of rough edges with the system. For one, buggies tend to either be right on top of you, blocking access to interactable objects.
Dale, move. Dale, move. Jesus Christ, dude. Twice in like 30 seconds.
Or they're off in the distance fighting some random bug, leaving you to chase them down and revive them. It's frustrating, especially in the middle of something important.
Here we go again, Dale attacking someone for no fucking reason.
Another issue is with those spider web paths. They're clearly meant to slow you down heavily if you're not using the orb weaver mount, but currently, you can just hug the edges and avoid the slowdown entirely.
Yeah, you can kind of just do this.
The second most talked about addition has to be the new Omni-Tool. It combines your shovel, axe, hammer, and repair tool into one. And I have to say, I'm a huge fan. Not only does it save precious inventory space, but it also streamlines tool use in a smart way. I'll admit, I wasn't sold on the design at first, but it's definitely grown on me over time. Most players seem to love that it's not an inventory item. Instead, the tool is automatically prompted when you focus on something that you can interact with. It's a clever system, in theory. Personally though, I would have preferred if it was an inventory item I could switch to manually. The auto prompt can be a bit frustrating, especially when you're trying to harvest dead bugs or pick up loot and the prompt keeps trying to have you cut grass instead. It's not a deal breaker, but it does get in the way more often than I'd like. Now let's talk about the playable characters. Pete, Willow, Allie, and Max. In the first Grounded, one of the most charming aspects of the characters was their personality-filled voice lines. Whether they were eating, drinking, or reacting to the world, the dialogue felt fun and natural. I especially loved when the teens would actually respond to each other, creating little back and forth moments that added depth to who you were playing as. Sadly, that personality feels mostly absent in Grounded 2 so far. Right now, each character only has a line or two that you'll hear on repeat. After a few hours, it starts to get old. I'm really hoping this is just a placeholder situation during early access, because as it stands, it feels like the characters haven't matured or evolved at all from the first game. That's a bit disappointing, especially given the 2-year time jump in the story. That said, there are a few tiny moments that give me hope they're moving in the right direction. For example, Pete occasionally drops the technical name for raw science, which is a great callback to his nerdy side. And Allie has a hilarious line where she says she's gonna kick someone's ass.
Almost got burgled. Just need to whoop that girl's ass.
Hey, yo! You swear? Since when?
It's small, but it actually reflects a bit of growth and aging in the characters. Moments like those show that the team is actually thinking about how these teens might have changed. But right now, it feels too sparse. I just hope they expand on it more. These characters deserve to grow alongside the game's world. Really quickly, I want to touch on the building mechanics. They're nearly identical to the first game, which for the most part is a good thing. Building in Grounded was always fun and flexible, letting you construct on water, do tree-based builds, or even create castle-like bases. All of that still seems possible in the sequel, and it works just as well. But the issues start showing up when it comes to materials and progression. The Omni-Tool only goes up to Tier 2, yet Tier 3 materials are already scattered everywhere. You find pine cones right near the starting area,
Why?
and snail shells that just stay stuck wherever you happen to kill a snail. Both completely unusable for now. It's frustrating to be surrounded by resources you can't interact with, especially so early on. Then there's the lack of an oven, which is honestly a huge setback. No oven means no mushroom bricks, which severely limits your base building creativity, and it doesn't stop there. Some weapons can't even be crafted because the required processed materials aren't accessible without it. I'll come back to that a bit later, but it's a pretty glaring issue for anyone looking to fully explore the crafting system. But honestly, the biggest disappointment for me is the absence of the coziness meter from the first game. That system actually rewarded you for putting in time and effort into decorating and upgrading your base. It gave you blueprints and functional rewards tied to your base's aesthetic. In Grounded 2, there's just no reason to build beyond the bare minimum. Even the buffed acorn turrets feel pointless because the threats just don't justify using them. And speaking of the snail shells, that leads into a few thoughts about item design in Grounded 2. One issue right now is that you can't consistently use the snail armor. Not because it's weak, but because snail shells are currently finite. Since they can't be harvested yet, you can only get a handful of repairs out of the armor before it becomes unusable.
Why? Please, bro.
It's frustrating to have cool gear that feels temporary because of resource limitations. On the flip side, I love that the devs continued the tradition of hidden special items. Weapons like the Pinchwhacker, Scarlet Aegis, and Heatwave are fun to find, and give a real sense of reward for exploring and experimenting.
I got it though.
I'm also really glad they brought back the raid-style unlock mechanic from the first game. In Grounded 1, getting the spicy Coltana meant surviving waves of larvae in a superheated coal bag. It was intense, memorable, and satisfying. In Grounded 2, they flipped that idea on its head with the icicles. This time, you're thrown into a freezing tipped ice cream cart, fighting off waves of enemies while dealing with the cold. It's a smart twist on a fan-favorite mechanic, and honestly, one of the standout moments so far. Mutations were a huge part of Grounded 1, acting as unlockable upgrades tied to your in-game actions. Each had multiple tiers you unlocked by repeating specific tasks. A great example is Natural Explorer, which increased your movement speed and was unlocked by discovering landmarks across the map. Thankfully, Mutations return in Grounded 2, and they've come back with some improvements. The menu looks cleaner, more modern, and easier to navigate than the first game. Plus, they've cut out some of the more random and underwhelming mutations, streamlining the system overall. But there are a couple problems. The first one is simple and honestly confusing. They removed the orbital quick select menu for switching mutation sets on the fly. It was a widely used feature in Grounded 1, and I'm not sure why it was left out. It made adjusting to different fights and tasks fast and intuitive, and its absence is definitely felt. The bigger issue, though, comes from Grounded 2's new focus on player archetypes. The game now encourages players to specialize their gear and mutations around a specific weapon type, like daggers, spears, or bows, rather than swapping between multiple tools like in the first game. At first glance, this sounds like a good way to encourage build diversity, but as Mediocre Milton pointed out in a video, it creates a fundamental conflict with how the enemy system works. If every bug still has different resistances and weaknesses, why would you lock yourself into one weapon type? It's often more efficient to just switch to whatever a bug is weak to, rather than sticking to your specialized setup. This undermines the whole archetype idea, and ends up feeling restrictive instead of empowering. And that leads into another one of my huge issues with Grounded 2, what I'd call the hotbar crisis. Right now, if you want to move something into your hotbar, you have to open your inventory, right-click the item, and then go through a menu to assign it to a slot. And you have to repeat that entire process every time you want to change something. It's slow, clunky, and breaks the flow of gameplay. In the first game, you could at least drag and drop items to bind them to hotbar slots. It wasn't perfect, but it was quick and functional. Honestly, I'd be happy if they just took one row from the inventory and made it visible as a hotbar. Even something that simple would make a huge difference. As it stands now, having no intuitive hotbar in a survival action game feels like a massive oversight. I really hope this is something they address soon, because it's easily one of the most frustrating parts of the current experience. Next, I really want to touch on a few random things I noticed, starting with lighting in caves. We seriously need some kind of hands-free option. Most of the good weapons in the game are two-handed, which means no torch, and the glow sticks? Yeah, they're there, but they're kinda crap, annoying to craft, and barely help during a fight.
Yeet.
So for most of the game, I was either swinging blindly in the dark, or luring enemies outside just so I could actually see what I was doing. A headlamp, a mining helmet, literally anything would make a massive difference. And speaking of luring enemies outside, that strategy led me to another thing. Bow spamming is still kinda busted. You can pretty easily cheese a lot of the enemies in the game just by moving to the right spot, or sometimes not even trying. Stuff just gets stuck staring at you while you pepper it with arrows. Yeah, this kind of thing was possible in the first game too, but there it felt like a clever workaround, like you earned the win. Here it just feels like you're skipping fights entirely. Maybe it's because you can pull it off with some of the stronger named enemies now, or maybe it's just how often it works with barely any effort. Either way, it makes combat feel weirdly lopsided at certain moments. Another major issue lies with the map. While the developers technically delivered on their promise that the early access map would be the same size as the entire map from the first game, the reality is there's nothing in it. As the bottom dweller pointed out, there are barely any minor landmarks scattered around the map. In the first game, you'd come across some random memorable objects, like a snail shell or an Etch-a-Sketch. Things that didn't necessarily serve a mechanical purpose, but helped you understand your scale in the world, and gave you clear visual landmarks to navigate by. This added a ton to the immersion. In Grounded 2, those little touches are almost completely gone. Worse, the map feels artificially filled with enemies. Scorpions and orb weavers are everywhere, seemingly for no reason other than to make the space feel less empty.
Scorpions were gonna be so cool, and then they just added them fucking everywhere on the map, and no one cares. They could have been so dope, but instead they're just annoying.
In the original Grounded, enemy placement felt deliberate. You wanted to fight bees? Head to the picnic table.
Look at all the bees.
Antlions? Obviously the sandbox. Bugs had distinct habits, and that made the world feel alive and logical. In Grounded 2, that design philosophy is missing. Want to fight bees? Good luck, there might be 2 or 3 sitting on a random rock, and only if you're there at the right time of day. There are no reliable biomes or hotspots for specific bugs to gather, which makes targeted exploration or farming frustrating. The progression design is also completely off. Items crucial for progression are randomly scattered across the map instead of being tied to natural gameplay milestones. In Grounded 1, it took effort to reach the upper yard, and once you got there, you'd naturally start encountering enemies like black ox beetles and find resources like pine cones that matched your current tier. It felt earned. In Grounded 2, I found a pine cone in the starting area.
Why? Why is this here then? If it requires an upgrade, why is it right next to the starter area? Let alone, why is it in the goddamn game?
And from my base, in the starting area, I can literally see a mantis, one of the strongest enemies in the game. Why?
Why is this here? Why are you here? Bro, you're right next to my base. What the fuck? What? This is the starting area.
Finally, I want to talk a bit about the roadmap the devs have released. They've laid things out into 4 big updates. One coming in fall, then winter, summer, and a vague future plans section. And it gives players something to look forward to. But at the same time, it also kind of makes clear just how early access this game really is. A lot of stuff people are hoping for, like the oven, more mounts, or bug fixes, are probably still months away. It's exciting, but also a bit frustrating that some of the features missing are things that really should have been in the game from the start. Within the fall update, there's something listed as a building grid, which I'm not really sure about, but my guess is it'll be some kind of snap system for building. If that's the case, it could be a great addition for more precise or creative builds. There's also a mention of hot pouches on buggies, and while buggies are already really good, especially for travel and utility, being able to use items like heals or even a bow while riding would make them even better, and a lot more versatile in combat situations. And then you'll notice a lot of stuff in the roadmap is labeled as Axle, which if the community theories are right, means we're getting a tarantula boss. With Axle armor, furniture, and weapons also listed, it sounds like it'll drop unique materials, which is awesome. That means we're finally getting a farmable boss again, which was easily one of the best parts of the first game. Plus they're planning to add an arena specifically for Axle, and I'm genuinely excited to see the final designs. Moving on to the winter update, the first thing listed is Steam Deck Verified, which basically means the game has been tested and runs well on the Steam Deck. It also means crossplay on Steam Deck will be fully supported, which is always a solid quality of life addition. They're also adding Playground mode, something returning from the first game, and honestly something I think should have been in at launch. It's a great way to mess around, test mechanics, and build without limitations, so I'm glad it's coming back, even if it's a bit late. Right below that is another thing I strongly feel should already be in the game: coziness. Like I mentioned earlier, I really don't get why this was left out. It was such a good system in the first game, giving you real rewards and blueprints for putting time and effort into decorating your base. Without it, once you've built your starter base, there's barely any incentive to go further. No cozy meter, no progression tied to your home, just walls to hide behind during orc raids, which aren't even that threatening, honestly. It takes the fun and creativity out of base building and makes it feel kind of empty. But then we move on to some fun stuff. First off, the Ladybug Buggy. That sounds awesome, and I honestly can't wait to ride around on what's basically a tank. It's got that bulky armored vibe, and I'm really hoping it lives up to that in combat, or even just in durability. They're also adding the ability to use the peeper while riding a buggy, which is a great quality of life improvement. Being able to scan for enemy weaknesses and resistances without hopping off every 2 seconds is just a small change, but a super welcome one. After you scroll down a bit more, you'll see something that's awesome for everyone, except me. They're adding crickets and earwigs to the park, which just so happen to be the 2 bugs that I'm most terrified of on the planet. So yeah, super thrilled they're both showing up at the same time. Jokes aside, I actually am excited, in a nervous, slightly panicked way, to see how they're handled in-game. They're also adding new variants to existing bugs, which is always great for keeping things fresh. As much as those 2 creep me out, I really can't wait to see how they look and behave in the world. Once we get to the bottom of the winter update, we actually see a couple of solutions to the big issues I mentioned earlier in the video. Mainly the addition of what I assume are mushroom bricks, and hopefully that also means the oven is finally coming back. On top of that, they're throwing in some new base pieces, furniture, and defenses, which is great to see, especially if raids ever decide to stop being pushovers. As we move on to the summer update, we start to see another thing that should have 100% been in the game at launch: zip lines. I honestly can't think of a good reason why they're not already in. They were easily one of the most loved features from the first game. I spent hours building massive zipline networks, and at a certain point they became more than just a way to get around. They were part of the fun. Not having them right now feels like a huge step back. And what makes it worse is knowing that they're coming, but not until next summer. That's a long wait for something that honestly should have been in from day one. And they'll finally be adding tier 3 upgrades for the Omni-Tool. So by next summer, I can finally break the pine cone that's been sitting in front of my house since day one.
Okay.
Tier 3 tools will open up a whole new world for building, combat, exploration, and more. I honestly can't wait for this one. The rest of this update seems focused entirely on the water, adding new aquatic creatures. Not sure if they'll be brand new or returning from the first game, but they've also hinted at some kind of swimming update. I'm guessing that might mean an underwater dash, or even some new underwater combat mechanics. Either way, I'm really curious to see where they go with it. But the 2 things I'm most excited for are definitely watery buggies and the water bases. And it says buggies plural, so we might be getting more than one. Whether they're meant for underwater, on top of the water, or both, I'm on board. Buggies are easily one of the most fun parts of the game already. As for water bases, I don't even care if they're above or below the surface. I'm hyped either way. My best friend and I built a floating base and basketball court in the first game, and if we can recreate or even upgrade on that in Grounded 2, I'll be absolutely stoked. Lastly, we move on to the future plans section, which I'm assuming is just where they dumped everything they want to add eventually but don't have a timeline yet. Overall, it looks like more of everything. New bugs, new gear, new building pieces, and way more buggy stuff, plus a few extra quality of life improvements sprinkled in. Nothing super specific yet, but it's a good sign that they're planning to keep expanding on the core parts of the game. Now you might be wondering why I skipped over the parts of the roadmap that are covered in purple spray paint. Well, my guess is that all of these are story-based content, which they've intentionally hidden. Makes sense for two reasons. One, they obviously don't want to spoil major plot points, and two, that's the same purple paint that shows up all throughout the story in the actual game. So whatever's behind it is probably tied directly into the main narrative. We'll just have to wait and see what they're cooking up. Overall, Grounded 2 carries over much of what made the first game great, and in many ways, that's its strongest quality right now. But at the same time, that's also part of the problem. Aside from the visual polish and few new mechanics, it doesn't yet feel like a meaningful evolution to the original. Yes, it's still in early access, but looking at the current roadmap and what's already in the game, I can't help but wonder if this release was rushed. Features like Playground Mode and the Coziness Meter, both of which were present in the first game, are completely missing here. Their absence makes the game feel like a step backward in some ways, and it seriously raises the question of whether Grounded 2 was ready for release at all. That said, the game is absolutely beautiful, and I was lucky enough to avoid any major lag. I did experience about 5 crashes over my 25 hours of gameplay,
And I guess that's where we end, because the game crashed. Alright.
but overall performance was solid for me. Unfortunately, that doesn't seem to be the case for everyone. I've heard from plenty of other players that the game can barely run at times, with frequent stuttering, crashes, and performance drops being pretty common. If you're on the fence about picking this game up, wait. I genuinely believe Grounded 2 has the potential to be something incredible, but it's just not there yet. In its current state, it feels unfinished and unbalanced. Give it time to grow into what it's clearly trying to be. And while I know adding all of this will take more time, I really hope the developers take a step back and revisit the current map to add detail and the environmental storytelling that made the first game so immersive. I love Grounded, and I genuinely want this game to succeed. It just needs more time and attention to become something truly great. If you really like how this game looks and plays, go play the first game, and come back to this one in about a year. By that time, I think it'll be an amazing game, and you'll really enjoy it. For now, that's all I have to say about the game. Thank you for watching, and have a great day.